I want to tell you a little bit about the genesis, the source of today's sermon, and why I'm sharing such a personal sermon. So after the Martin Luther King service in January, two absolutely wonderful newer members of the church asked me a question. And now the service had talked about the deep personal relationship that Martin Luther King had with his Christian faith, his deep Christian faith, and his deep connection to Jesus, and by extension, to God. Also talked about how the song, "Precious Lord, Take My Hand," was such a spiritual sustainer for Dr. Martin Luther King. And this wonderful couple asked me the question, does God talk to you? Now, it's been a long time, actually, since somebody asked me a question like that. So, first of all, the sermon, though, is not just about me. It's an opportunity and an invitation for each one of us to reflect on what we personally believe. And it's a chance for us all to think about how each of us connect to that which is greater than us. As Laurie said, transcendent, perhaps holy. How do we hear the stirrings of what some of us call spirit, some of us call intuition or inner knowing, some of us call the greater strength of humanity, and some of us call the voice of God? It's also an opportunity to reflect on one of the most liberating and challenging aspects of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We don't have a creed. We don't have a set of beliefs that we have to accept to be part of this church community. We don't have a set of beliefs that somebody else in the past decided was true. We say that Unitarian Universalism is a free faith, which means that we're free to define our own spiritual beliefs. We're free to determine what beliefs are authentic to us so that we can have a personally authentic spiritual life that might be very different from the authentic personal spiritual life of the person sitting next to you. Unitarian Universalism champions a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That doesn't mean that we don't have things in common. We have clear religious values that unite us, and love is at the center. That's why we can quote that great Unitarian martyr, Francis David, who died in 1579 in a Transylvanian prison cell because of his profound commitment to creating and sustaining a faith tradition in which, as Francis David said, we need not think alike to love alike. I like that. Could you say that with me? We need not think alike to love alike. Or we can say just as easily, in Unitarian Universalism, we need not believe alike to love alike. Which means that you and I may have very different spiritual beliefs, very different spiritual practices, but we are each committed to our shared religious values that absolutely, clearly put love at the center. So when I talk about my own spiritual beliefs, how I find God or define higher power or experience the transcendent, the holy, at the core of it, for me personally, is a contradiction. There is a contradiction that has written all over my heart and mind. It took a lot of years and a lot of spiritual blood, sweat, and tears to be at peace with the contradiction that infuses and informs my personal spiritual belief. And that contradiction is, my head is a humanist and my heart is a mystic. So let me explain. My head is a humanist. When I think, I know that I like to be grounded in a rational, reason way of thinking. I want to be anchored in the here and now, in the absolutely, clearly, scientifically explainable. I want to be able to see things clearly with my own eyes. I want things to be discerned with my own mind. And there's no place really for mystery, because in the end, all things that happen can be explained by the laws of science. And if they haven't yet been explained, at some point in the future, they will be. My head is a humanist, but my heart is such a mystic. Because my heart knows that although that's true, that humanism is true, there's also something else that is undefinable, that is other, that is transcendent, that is beyond my rational mind. I can't define it or explain it, but I've had enough experiences of mystery, perhaps, to know that that also is true. Yes, there's the physical world, but there's also the spiritual world, and in reality, they aren't two different worlds. They are one world in constant, continual communication with itself. My heart is a mystic. Poet David Whyte captures beautifully the yearning of the mystic when he writes these words: all my body calls for something in this sleeping earth we call the spirit. But how from lifted arms where stars run through fingers and the night is like sand, how do I breathe a fragrance of its wisdom? Do I call its name or listen to the drops that trickle down to earth and hear life being given? Not only through the moving hands of the forest, but through the hand that reaches in the dark, unmoving regions of the chest and uncovers slowly the enormous, indistinct shape of the ocean. And I'm going to say those words again, because he packs a whole lot into it, and because these words hold so much and say so much and invite so much and invoke so much and intuit so much. Again, the words of David Whyte: all my body calls for something in this sleeping earth we call spirit. But how? From lifted arms where stars run through fingers and the night is like sand, how do I breathe a fragrance of its wisdom? Do I call its name or listen to the drops that trickle down to earth and hear life being given? Not only through the moving hands of the forest, but through the hand that reaches in the dark, unmoving regions of the chest and uncovers slowly the enormous, indistinct shape of the ocean. Now, there's one place that I most strongly feel this mystical connection, this mystical yearning, this mystical calling to that which is greater, to that which is the source of all, the great mystery, the universe, the silent presence, the uncertain bearer of the weight of it all, of what some of us call God, that which is ultimately able to be felt but not named. And that place of my connection, my greatest connection, my strongest connection, is also one of the most powerful contradictions, again, of my life. Now, anybody who knows me knows I like sunny weather. I like the sun. I like warm. I like heat. I like daytime. That's one reason I'm in Fresno. The sun, the warmth, the heat, a lot of daytime. I'm not a fan of cloudy days or the cold. I'm not a fan of nighttime. I'm not a champion of that season we call winter. I'm not a champion of the winter, of the ice and snow and wind chills below zero in the Midwest, where I grew up, and in New England, where I lived most of my adult life. And I am no fan of the gray, cool, wet, and once again foggy winters that haunt Fresno. No offense to those who I see love the cool, the gray, the wet, and the once again foggy winters that haunt Fresno. And yet, the contradiction, the place I feel most connected to that which is greater than me, the place I hear most clearly the voice and stirrings of the Spirit, is exactly what I like the least, what I wish I could avoid. Because for me, the place where I feel Spirit, where I hear Spirit, is outside, at night, in the dark, under the cold and stark winter sky. There's just something about that clean crispness of a winter night. Those trees. But unlike the trees, Laurie, that you described, it's the trees without the leaves, so they're bare limbs like skeletons, unfleshed arms and hands reaching up towards the transcendent, where stars run through their fingers. I love the starkness, the smallness that I feel under that dark night sky. I like that feeling of exposure, of being exposed and laid bare in the moonlight. Because there, under that expanse of the black, endless sky, I feel connected to the unknowable, as Laurie said, the infinite, and yet I also feel utterly visible and connected to what is attainable. Nighttime for me outside in winter feels pure, pristine, and primal. It's as if the cold awakens me, it invigorates me, freshens me, quickens me. In the cold winter night, it's easier to feel your breath come in and out. You can see your breath come in and out in the freezing cold air. And there in that beautiful black darkness, there are no distractions. The cold night makes my senses alert. It awakes me, it makes me receptive, open to the energy of all the layers of the night and the hidden beauty of it all, the mystery of it all, the sheer awesomeness of it all, of which I am a part. In the black winter nothingness, it lets me feel that interdependent web of all creation, and I feel not just its vastness, but how I am woven into it. In fact, when I used to live in New England in the winter, when it was a really big, heavy snowstorm, I would go out at night into my backyard and just lie down in the snow, look up at the sky, the trees peripherally around me, and I could feel that energy of the earth itself just seep into me. I could feel the energy from the sky just seep down to me. It made me think of that song we sometimes sing, that great Unitarian hymn that says, "Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all." I think of Taoist spiritual teacher Deng Ming Dao, who writes, "By moonlight, we see black and white. We cannot see colors. There's something," he says, "fascinating and valuable about seeing the world that way. We see only what is essential. We see form emerging from a sea of blackness. We can look at the world so familiar by daylight and see it anew in the black and white moonlight. The day warms, the night cools, stand in the middle of the night woods and watch the shadows." I think two of those famous words by Unitarian philosopher and mystic Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson wrote, "In the woods, a person casts off their years. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity which nature cannot repair. Standing," Emerson writes, "on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God." So let's return to the original question that spurred this sermon, and Ian jumping ahead just a bit. Does God, does that which is greater than myself speak to me? No. Absolutely not. Not in the language of a human being. But it does in the language of spirit, in the language of night and nature, in the language of starkness, in the language of being stripped bare, in the language of the cold, the primal, and the seeing something anew. My dear ones, that which is greater than us can speak to us in many languages, can speak to us through many forms and manifestations. For some of us, it is mystical, magical, transcendent mystery, and for others, it is fully human, concrete, and centered solely within oneself. That which is greater than us can speak to us and through us in many different beliefs. Beliefs as varied as there are minds to think and hearts to hold them. In the end, that which is greater than us can speak to us through the language of love. For as we Unitarian Universalists know, we need not think alike to love alike. We need not believe alike to love alike. May it be so. Que así sea, bendito sea, blessed be. Amen.